week with a thumper and Landon Dickerson from Alabama. I'm going to do the same thing this week with a guy that is a beast at 6'4", 320 pounds. I'm talking about Cedarius Hutcherson, inside offensive lineman from South Carolina, with Brandon Brooks, Isaac Seumalo set to start, and guys like Matt Pryor, who's being groomed for the last few years. I think the Eagles do have stability at that guard position. However, I don't think the Eagles should spend a high asset here, but in that day 3 range, that's where I think there is some real talent for the Philadelphia Eagles here. What you love about Cedarius Hutcherson is this is a guy with tremendous versatility. It's a guy with a ton of experience coming into the NFL. He's got both right guard, tackle, and left-right versatility. He started at left tackle, left guard, and right guard for South Carolina. He's nearly got 4 years starting experience in that SEC. This is pound for pound one of the strongest and most athletic offensive linemen in the entire draft class. He was a former tight end. He benches 450 pounds, squats 600 pounds, and has a 31.5-inch vertical. This is a big-time blocker with a mauler's mentality. He'll be best suited to play in a gap blocking scheme. When you watch tape, though, this guy has good quickness off the snap. He's best blocking downhill in power run plays, particularly in man-gap schemes. I think this is a guy with starting upside, which uses a power blocking scheme and the ability to line up at either left or right guard. I see this guy as a guard moving forward. I know the Eagles have depth there at guard, but when we're talking about a day 3 pick and you can get a guy that adds depth, starting potential, at the end of the day, whether it's Carson Wentz or Jalen Hurts, it's about protecting those guys. You can never have enough offensive linemen, quality young offensive linemen. Cedarius Hutcherson would be an excellent round 5, round 6 pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. You're up, Shane.
You know, the Eagles they've got a good track record of taking offensive linemen that used to play tight end. That seems to work out well for them, so I'm all about it. My number 5 guy is quarterback, which don't throw stones at me. We've already had the quarterback discussion, and I did not come out of that very well with a lot of our viewers. But, you know, the reality is, regardless of what you think of the Eagles' current quarterback situation, a Carson Wentz trade is looming, and that only leaves us with one quarterback on the roster in Jalen Hurts. And you can't enter a season with one quarterback or even with 2. The Eagles are going to have 3 quarterbacks on the roster. And so, you know, I think they're probably going to sign a guy in free agency, not a big name or anything, but a body. But I think that we're crazy if we don't think they're going to take a flyer on a quarterback. After all, they consider themselves a quarterback factory. And so a guy that I think fits that bill that could be there, you know, mid to late on day 3 is quarterback Kellen Mond from Texas A&M University. You know, there's a lot of things to like about him as a prospect. One of the big things is that Texas A&M, they run a lot of multi-level read concepts. And through his career at Texas A&M, he really showed progression in how quickly he could process those reads and come off of guys to his next guy, find the guy that's open and get it there. He's really good at keeping his eyes downfield when there's pressure in his face. You know, he stands tall in the pocket. He moves in the pocket well. And so, you know, I think I should have written this down, but I think it was something like he took like 8 sacks last season. And that's an absurdly low number of sacks. He's got mobility. He's not like a pure running quarterback, but he's got the mobility to take advantage of some running lanes if they're there. He's not the type of guy that you're going to design runs for, but he can take advantage of those. And on the biggest stages, he plays well. Against Alabama and against Florida in back-to-back weeks this season, he threw for 656 yards and 6 touchdowns versus only 1 interception. And at the Senior Bowl, he was the MVP. So he steps up in those big moments on big stages, and he looks like he belongs. Now, obviously, we're talking about him as a day 3 prospect, so there's some downsides to him. He's got some unpredictable ball placement. You know, sometimes he puts it right on the money, but other times he really struggles to put it in those windows. He doesn't have the strongest arm either. He's kind of got an unconventional release, does some weird things with his arm, and it hasn't really necessarily affected his accuracy too much, but Maybe he could generate more velocity if they fix that. I don't know. Maybe he could pick that up. But those are some concerns with him. But again, long-term, maybe he's a backup for Hurts. Maybe he's a developmental guy. That's really all you want out of a day 3 quarterback. But I do think the Eagles will strongly consider taking one in this draft.
Love it, love it, love it. What about you, Mark? You're up, dude. What's your number 5 best prospect in day 3?
I'm moving down the line and sticking in the QB factory. I agree. I do think that there's a pretty good chance that Howie takes his swing at another factory worker to add to the assembly line. And there's also, like you said, there's only one quarterback on the roster after a Carson Wentz trade. I don't think Nate Sudfeld is necessarily coming back unless it's on an extremely cheap deal. And even then, it's a new regime. I don't really see Sudfeld coming back. And I don't know if we have the cap to really address a backup quarterback or get a legitimate backup quarterback like a Andy Dalton type that's going to cost a little bit more than we really can allocate to a backup quarterback. So I think a guy that we could be looking at is Sam Ellinger from Texas. He's obviously not a fantastic thrower, but he's still limited on his interceptions and turnovers and threw for a lot of touchdowns. In fact, he had the most touchdowns under pressure this year and was the best quarterback in the Big 12 under pressure. So he certainly is a little improvisational in the pocket, and he's able to move around, which is able to help him against a blitz or against any sort of pressure. And I do think he could be a good backup in the NFL due to his moxie, his confidence, and his improvisational ability. He's not a small guy at 6'3", 225. I think he could very well be Taysom Hill-ish, which I don't necessarily support as a gadget player. I'm not someone who loves using 2 quarterbacks. I didn't love it with Hurts last year, the idea of that. But I do think it's perfectly fine change of pace backup quarterback. And I think the same thing about Taysom Hill. I actually think Ellinger is a little bit more accurate, at least than Taysom Hill is. I don't know about the deep ball. It does seem like Taysom Hill is a little bit better of a deep ball. But I do think, especially with a guy like Jalen Hurts, if he's our starting quarterback moving forward, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have the backup quarterback be someone who can run around a bit too, so you're not completely adjusting your offense if Jalen Hurts were to get hurt or something were to happen.
Awesome. So we got back-to-back quarterbacks here for the Philadelphia Eagles on day 3, number 5 prospects. It's going to happen. The Eagles have to address the quarterback position. Hopefully not at number 6, but definitely in that day 3 range. And definitely not round 2. Definitely not round 2. Let's not go that route. I'm going to go with my number 4, and that is safety Richard Lecount, one of the best ball hawks in the country, who I think would be a really good pick in that 4th round range for the Philadelphia Eagles. Lecount is a ball hawk. He notched 4 interceptions and 2 forced fumbles in 2019. In 2020, he had 3 interceptions in just 5 games. What you got to love about Richard Lecount is his intelligence. This is an instinctual defensive back who is a leader on and off the field. You saw him a lot calling the plays there for Georgia. Lecount is a guy who started 27 of 28 games over the last 2 seasons. That was a part of an elite Georgia team. He was a former 5-star recruit. Obviously, this kid has a ton of talent. And this is a guy who was absolutely ridiculous back in 2019, who had 2 interceptions against Baylor in that Sugar Bowl. The biggest knock on Richard Lecount is, and the reason why he's falling here in that 4th, 5th round range, is that he has lack of size and tackling. He's only 5'11". He's 190 pounds wet. Plus, he had some really bad tape on some bad missed tackles. When you watch him live, he plays soft. This is a guy that's going to have to beef up in the NFL, and he doesn't possess elite athleticism. He gets the job done due to his instincts, due to his amazing football IQ. So despite that lack of explosiveness, though, he does work on rerouting wide receivers at the line of scrimmage. He's very fluid laterally. He's not a straight line guy, but where it counts as a cornerback, I think, like in between. So I think he would be a terrific pick. You look at last year, the Eagles drafted Kayvon Wallace, who is suited probably to be that like Malcolm Jenkins role down the line. So you look at Richard Lecount fitting right into that cover 2 scheme under new defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon. I think this guy's going to fall because of that lack of strength, because of that lack of speed. That shouldn't discount how good and talented this kid is. I would love to see the Eagles take a flyer on this guy in that 5th or 6th round. You're up, man, Shane.
All right. Well, my number 4, we're going to look at the linebacker position. I've got linebacker Tony Fields II out of West Virginia. I mean, it's no surprise to anybody that the Eagles desperately need linebacker help. We've got Alex Singleton. You know, he showed that he can play last year, but outside of him, there's really nobody that the Eagles have on the roster. Davion Taylor was a total waste of a pick, and so the Eagles are void of talent at linebacker. Some of the things I really like about Fields, I'm a Big 12 guy, so I've watched him play a decent amount. He is a very aggressive tackler, but he's very aggressive, but he's technically sound. He doesn't miss a lot of tackles. He's willing to come up and pop you. He has great instincts at the position, particularly as a run defender, which if the Eagles are going to move to a split field safety look, it becomes even more important that your linebackers are able to be plus in the running game because you're taking a defender out of the box. So you're going to be in these light boxes. He's a really patient player while he's processing plays, which he does really quickly, but he doesn't overcommit and run himself out of a play. You don't see a lot of instances of him, running into the wrong gap or being fooled by misdirection. You just don't see that a lot. Now, when you ask him to play coverage, that's when the wheels start to come off a little bit. He's got athleticism, but he's kind of got stiff hips when you ask him to turn and to run with someone in man coverage. And then when we sit him in zone coverage, he tends to really lock in on the quarterback, which is a good thing, but he does it to the degree that he's kind of becomes unaware of the route concepts developing around him. And so if you could get that awareness up a little bit, he's the type of player that could thrive in an NFL scheme. I see him as kind of a will linebacker because of his athleticism, his size. He's a little undersized, but he played at the Mike linebacker for West Virginia. And, he's got those run defending traits that could help him thrive there if he can bulk up a little bit. So, I think he's a guy that you could kind of experiment with in 2 different roles at the NFL level. I think he could develop into a nice player.
Just dawned on me that I do not have a linebacker on my top 5 day 3. I went heavy on linebacker in our previous pod on day 2, but yeah, that's let's roll on. Go ahead, Shane. I think you want to say something.
I was just going to say, welcome to the Eagles front office. You forgot about linebacker.
Well said, sir. Well said, sir. All right, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was looking for a linebacker to put on there as well, but I like you said, with the day 2 prospects, it really seems like the linebackers that are to be had are really ranked in the 50s, 60s, 70s area overall. So it's tough. I didn't want to put someone who was probably ranked a little bit too high, who may not get to day 3 on the list. So I have a guy coming up next who I think we're going to be talking about a couple times. I think you guys both have him on your list too, but I have running back Trey Sermon out of Ohio State. He was productive in limited work at Oklahoma in his first 3 years at Oklahoma before he transferred to Ohio State and ran for 7.5 yards per carry. It's a shame we didn't get to see him play more because the Big Ten only played 8 games and had all the cancellations, and that was a whole mess in itself. But what we did get to see is we saw him play in big games in the Big Ten championship when it wasn't looking great for Ohio State. Trey Sermon was the one to pick them up and to get them going again, not Justin Fields. And against Clemson, Trey Sermon just ran all over the field. And then you look at what happened the next game, as soon as he goes out against Alabama, and it looked like you took away the most important player on the field to Ohio State. And it absolutely killed them. And I think that the reason for that is he's not much of a receiver. He adds a little bit, but he's a fantastic pass blocker. He's absolutely insane. 241 snaps in his career. He's only allowed 9 pressures and 1 sack. If you listen to how Justin Fields ever talked about him in interviews, it's like his favorite person in the world. And why wouldn't he be if he's protecting you and keeping your jersey clean? And he's also getting 7.5 yards per carry. This is a guy I don't draft running backs high personally. I'm not someone who would want to take him in the top 50 picks. Even Miles Sanders. I don't know if Miles Sanders has been good enough to warrant taking someone in the 2nd round quite yet. But Trey Sermon is a guy that I think is a second, third round prospect you can possibly get in the fourth or fifth round. After the season, it seemed like I saw him in rankings around the 50s or 60s overall. But if you look now, I don't see him in the top 90 of really any rankings. And I can't really wrap my head around that. Besides missing the receiver aspect, he's a fantastic blocker. He's big enough. He can get short yardage. I don't really see the weakness that's dragging him down to day 3.
Yeah, I'm going to just be honest. He's my number 1. And I'll just piggyback off what you said. You absolutely nailed it. Although I'm not the biggest Ohio State fan, I really like Trey Sermon. And I think he would have amazing value in that fourth round range. Miles Sanders is undoubtedly one of the foundational pieces for Nick Sirianni moving forward. But you look at, after a sophomore campaign where he carried the ball 164 times for 867 yards, an impressive 5.3 yards per carry. You know where he dipped? As a receiver. Miles Sanders took a step backwards after an impressive rookie season. 28 receptions for 197 yards versus 50 for 509 yards and 3 touchdowns as a rookie from Miles Sanders. You look at that Indianapolis Colts team with that Frank Reich, Nick Sirianni offense. It utilized its receivers really well. Jonathan Taylor had over 1,100 yards. Nyheim Hines was kind of that change of pace back for that team. I think Trey Sermon doesn't really provide that passing threat that I think Nick Sirianni wants. However, when we're talking about a 4th or 5th round pick, who the hell cares? I think this guy has tremendous value and can be a legit number 2 running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. I love him. He's my number 1. He's my number 1 on my day 3 list. Any comments on that, Shane?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm an Oklahoma guy. I watched Sermon play for 3 years before he transferred, and I think what you guys are saying is right. He's a big, powerful back. He's really great in pass protection. Doesn't offer much as a receiver, but the Eagles need kind of that short yardage back complement to Miles Sanders. And I don't think I've said this before, Miles Sanders is that guy that has 11 carries for 10 yards and then he rips off a 60-yarder. And you need that guy that can consistently move the ball. Sanders tends to get dropped at the line, and then he rips off a big one. You need somebody that can consistently move the sticks. And an added bonus with Sermon is, he was used in a rotation at OU. He had the shortened season at Ohio State. He doesn't have a season with more than 160 carries under his belt. So he should be fresh, even though he's an older prospect because he played all 4 years in college. He should have a lot of tread left on the tires. I think he'd be a great day 3 pick.
Awesome. He also, like I said with the Justin Fields thing, piggybacking off that, I've also seen, I think Lincoln Riley even said something about him. I think Oklahoma coaches have come out on Twitter and said, Trey Sermon is unbelievable. It seems like everyone that's played with him and everyone that's worked with him is pretty much supporting his case and going to the NFL. And then if you look even in his pro day today, he was raising money for domestic abuse victims. He just seems like a great guy. He seems like a great leader in the locker room. He's been on successful teams his whole entire college career. I think that would probably give you good habits as well as him being a fantastic player.
All right, let's roll on to my number 3 here. Let's keep it rolling. I started my number 5 with a thumper. Then I went to a small guy, 5'10" guy out of Georgia. Now I'm going back to the board. Living in the trenches. I'm going William Bradley King, edge rusher from Baylor. I love a good underdog story. Who doesn't love? I'm an Eagles fan. Who doesn't love a good underdog story? And this is a really strong one. He was a 2-star prospect, 2-star recruit out of high school, really unranked on some of the boards out there. As a guy who barely received any recognition from Division I schools until late. He got attention from Arkansas State. He went there for 3 years. You saw him really become a standout in 2018. He played 12 games, 9.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. He finally earned that full-time starting position in 2019, and that's where he really kind of made a name for himself. He dominated the Sun Belt Conference that year in 2019, started all 13 games, 49 tackles, 13.5 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. That got him all first team, all Sun Belt. And then he transferred to Baylor his senior season. And that's where he, again, was a true standout in 2020. He was the anchor for Baylor's defensive line, and he led the team in pass deflections, which is a major strength of his. Long arms, we'll get to that in a little bit. 5.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 4 deflections, and a pass deflection. So what stands out about William Bradley King is that he's just got tremendous size, 6'4", 255 pounds. This is a long, massive edge rusher with a ridiculous wingspan that just has a knack for knocking down balls at the line of scrimmage. He's got really good burst. He's also really good against the run. The Eagles, you look at the Eagles team, like the Eagles need to find depth on their defensive line as good as they have. Like, what do you got with Josh Sweat? He's probably a rotation player at best. Adding a guy like this in that day 3 range to just keep guys fresh is a no-brainer for me. And most importantly, though, when you watch tape of this guy, what he is good at is he never fails he never falls for the misdirection plays. How many times did we see the Eagles defensive line fail at that over and over again? That was one of their Achilles heel as a defense. William Bradley King, he does need some coaching. However, I think this is definitely a guy to keep an eye out for on day 3. I think he would be a perfect round 4, round 5 pick. All right, Shane, you're up, man.
All right, the next guy I want to talk about is wide receiver Daz Newsome from North Carolina. You start out watching North Carolina, watching, their running backs. They got 2 running backs that, are going to go on day 2. And then, they got a receiver. They've got a linebacker. There's just a lot of talent out of North Carolina in this draft. But Newsome, he is good at what he does, and what he does is going to be limited to being a slot receiver. I don't think you can really project him to ever go outside in the NFL, but again, he's got a limited route tree, but he's good at what he does: out, whips, slants, fly routes, things like that. He's got really good hands. He doesn't have a high drop rate at all. He's not going to be your contested catch guy, but he's not going to drop passes. He gets great separation out of his routes, which he sets up with sharp breaks and really quickness, quick acceleration out of those breaks. Really good rack ability. He's the type of guy that you want to manufacture touches for. You want to get him the ball in space, which I don't know if you've heard, but that's what they say Nick Sirianni's offense is going to do. And so you've got Jalen Reagor you can do that with. Maybe you throw in this guy too. He's a really good blocker. For his size, obviously he's smaller, but he's a good blocker for his size. But like I said, you're going to have to keep him in the slot. You're going to have to keep him off the line, keep him in some condensed splits because he really struggles against press. He does not get off of press coverage very well. And he also struggles to get off of contact at the top of hhis route stem. So that's something that he's going to have to grow in, but I think he could plug in and play. He'd be an upgrade on your man, Greg Ward, he's the reliable guy, but he does not offer anything after the catch. So he'd be a good slot receiver, and he'd be a good punt returner. He fielded 104 punts in college. 54 of those were fair catches, and then he had 50 of them that he averaged 10.7 yards per return on. So that's good return numbers over a pretty big sample size. And out of those 104 punts, he only muffed 1. So, even if all he did was be a punt returner, which I think he'd be more than that day 1, but even if that's all he did, it'd be worth a day 3 pick because our special teams were abysmal last year. And there were so many times that we started, with the ball inside the 5 because we let punts drop and just wasn't good. And so I think he offers you an upgrade in 2 places, and I think he'd be a great day 3 pick.
All right, there she is. Easy on the Greg Ward hate. I won't stand for it. I will not stand for it.
Neither will I. I have a Greg Ward jersey.
I don't hate Greg Ward. I love his story, and I think he'd be a great wide receiver 5 for the Eagles. But I'm kind of done with the slot punt returner thing.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
All right. We have Abe Link says, what's going on? What's going on, man? Thanks for joining. All right, Mark, what's your number 3, dude?
This is my number 3 guy because it's at a running back position. I didn't want to rank him number 1, but this is probably my favorite player just in terms of my favorite to watch and to break down. Running back Jarrett Patterson out of Buffalo. This is a dude I was literally watching Buffalo games for last year. So I like staying up on Wednesday nights watching Buffalo Kent State. he had 1,100 yards and 19 touchdowns. It's pretty normal. It's a great running back season. He did it in 6 games. So it changes it a little bit. He played all 3 years at Buffalo, averaged over 6 yards per carry, and had 53 total touchdowns. He had a game with 409 yards and 8 touchdowns, and he was benched with like 5 minutes to go. He probably would have broke the record if his coach realized there was a record to be broken. And he has the second most forced missed tackles since 2018, behind only Travis Etienne in far less games. And he also has the most yards after contact since 2018, right in front of Travis as well. So if these two have been the most productive running backs in football over the last 3 years, obviously one did it at Clemson and one did it at Buffalo, so it's a little bit different. But one's going in the first round and one's going in the 6th round. So I think that there's phenomenal value with Jarrett Patterson. Not to mention he has not fumbled since early 2019. He's spent like 200 or 300 carries in a row without fumble or some crazy number. So he's a reliable guy. Again, another great short yardage guy, not much of a receiver. But I think he could be a phenomenal change of pace and a short yardage guy to complement Miles Sanders.
I'm a Temple fan, so I know Jarrett Patterson very well. In that first game, I remember in 2018, he didn't play. He was out. Well, he did play, but he was did very little damage. And I remember just being psyched that Temple Owls still lost. And then 2019, the guy just ran all over the Temple Owls defense. That would be a great pick. I think we're all on the same page. The Eagles should be looking at a running back in this area. It's a really deep area for the Eagles that they could pounce on one of these guys and get a really strong one. Let's go on to my number 2. Give me a second while I share my screen. And I'm not talking Andrew Wiggins. I'm talking James Wiggins from Cincinnati, a safety. On our day 2 pod a few days ago, I listed a lot of safety prospects and a lot of linebacker prospects. I think I'm going to stick with that trend here. I'm going to keep giving you safety prospects until they get it right, because the Eagles' safety position is an underrated area that really needs to be addressed this offseason. James Wiggins, a big-time playmaking safety prospect. The dude has solid size, 6 foot, 205 pounds. He struggled. The Eagles have struggled to create plays and create turnovers in that defensive backfield. We all know this. James Wiggins is clutch, to say the least. 3 of his 4 interceptions were walk-offs during his first season with the Cincinnati Bearcats, and that first year as a starter in 2018. He had an ACL tear, however, during practice in 2019. It ended his season before it started. Then he suffered another setback. Get ready for this. Injuring his knee on some stairs running to class. And it'll be interesting to see how Gannon employs the defensive backfield this season. But James Wiggins, he's a versatile defensive back who shows real balance, and I think would be any. Go ahead, Shane. You want to say something?
You said he injured his knee on stairs going his way to class?
Yeah.
He sounds like a perfect fit for the Eagles.
He's the only person who's earned the title student athlete. Getting injured on the way to being a student.
That might be the most durable guy on the Eagles defense, to be honest.
James Wiggins, he's a playmaker in the truest sense. He's a physical tackler with a nose on the ball. He had 31 tackles, a sack, a forced fumble, and an interception in 2020. Key part of one of the best defenses in the country last season. Injuries have shortened his career at Cincinnati, but super athletic, tons of versatility. He can play both the free and strong safety positions. He's got coverage skills. On the Eagles side, I think it's pretty clear that Jonathan Gannon is looking for a cover 2 deep safety. I think this guy would thrive in that role. James Wiggins, I'm looking at this guy as that 4th, 5th round prospect for the Eagles. This is my number 2. All right, Shane, you're up, my man.
Okay, my number 2 is a cornerback from Ohio State. We're going to talk about Shaun Wade. The Eagles need cornerback help. We've got Darius Slay on the outside, and we can talk about if the Eagles should, keep him and play him out on his contract or try to get something out of him. But that's a discussion for a different podcast. But regardless the Eagles need help at cornerback desperately outside of Slay. And so you look at a guy like Shaun Wade, and there's a lot of value to be had in this draft. I just wrote up a scouting report about Caleb Farley. I mean, there's a lot of good corners in this draft, but we're talking about some guys that could maybe slide into day 3, and Wade may not get there. I don't know. But if he does, I think he'd be a great 4th-round type of pick. He primarily plays zone, and he displays really good awareness when he is keying on the quarterback in zone coverage. Now, when you ask him to play man coverage, he really kind of struggles to mirror routes and anticipate cuts. And so you really want to protect this guy. You want to keep him in zone coverage. He's a really good tackler. He's a positive presence in the run game, which, again, moving to that split field safety scheme, that's a big thing. You need corners that can tackle. He's a good blitzer off of the edge. You know, he had a couple of sacks in 2019. No sacks in 2020, but coming off that edge, he does make his presence felt, which is something the Eagles don't really well, to be honest, I don't know if we have it or not because Schwartz never really blitzed off of the edge with corners, but it's something that you could incorporate in, and he has tremendous athletic ability. He came back in 2020. He was probably going to be a day 2 pick in 2019, and he came back because he had been a slot for Ohio State, and he wanted to prove that he could play outside. You got to love about a guy that he wants to go prove himself. Now, it didn't work out great. He did not look good transitioning to outside cornerback. I don't think that's his skill set. I think he's a guy that you want to keep in the slot. And you might say, why would we draft a slot corner? All we have are slot corners. But do we have a good one? I mean, you've got Avonte Maddox, but Maddox looked at his best at safety his rookie year. It's been downhill since. In Wade, I think you have a guy that projects that he could be a strong safety. He's good near the line of scrimmage. So you could work him in the slot. You can work him at strong safety. He's got some versatility. Maybe you could work him outside and split field because he can be aggressive underneath. He's got help over the top. I think there's a lot of things you could play with. There's a lot of talent and athleticism. I'm just not exactly sure where you would fit him in, but he gives you a lot of options on the defense. So Shaun Wade, Ohio State, I think he'd be a great 4th-round pick for the Eagles.
All right, let's go to some comments real quick. Abe Link says, I'm also pretty high on Jarrett Patterson. Good value pick to pair with Miles Sanders. Kevin says, I like Sam Ellinger and Kellen Mond. Dude, we just talked about those two. When we post this, you can go back and see our scouting reports. Abe also says, Shaun Wade reminds him of Jalen Mills, just more athletic. Does he have the green hair? I don't know. I don't think so. But that doesn't mean he can't have green hair. I already did my number 1. It was Trey Sermon. While Shane seems to be getting his act together, Mark, what's your number 1?
I still have my number 2. My number 2 wide receiver is Sage Serrat from Wake Forest. It feels like Serrat would have went higher last year had he been able to declare. But because in 2019, he had 66 catches for 1,007 yards and 11 touchdowns. But he opted out of 2020 and has fallen under the radar a little bit. Before, when people were writing the story in August about his opt-out, some people had him as a first rounder or a second rounder. Or I know that Matt Miller, a scout, had him as top 32. He's also the lesser-known brother of UNC linebacker Chaz Serrat, who will probably be a day 2 pick, who I'm very interested in. He's one of those linebackers I was talking about. Yep. So football clearly runs in this family. Sage Serrat is 6'3", 215, and absolutely ripped. PFF said that he is the most physical wide receiver in the 2021 draft. So what you lack maybe in top-tier speed and athleticism, you get in size and physicality. He could be a DJ Chark, Chase Claypool type that could really benefit in the later on rounds. It seems to me like, I don't know if he has upside to be like a top 20 receiver, but I feel pretty safe in saying that he will be an NFL receiver who will be in at least like rotations in the NFL. And he seems to have shown himself off really well at the Senior Bowl, connecting with Ian Book a couple times.
Love it, love it, love it. That is Sage Serrat, wide receiver from Wake Forest. That is his number. Yeah, go ahead, Shane.
I just want to say, based on that picture alone, I want him on this team.
Yeah,
I'll say I don't know who that defensive back is, but that guy just got murdered. He looks dead. He looks like Dead Vision from WandaVision. All right. We have Kevo says Tony Fields is a sneaky pick as well. That we already talked about him. So we seem to be on the same page here, except for Shea Patterson. We did not talk about Shea Patterson. All right, Shane, let's go on to number one. I already did my number one. What is your number one day 3 prospect?
My number one day 3 prospect is a defensive end or edge, however you want to title him, Ronnie Perkins from Oklahoma. Again, we talk about the need, the fit for the Eagles. Well, Brandon Graham's getting older. He's still going to be with the team, but he's getting older. You've got Josh Sweat, who has looked really good. But again, he's got the knee issues. He's managed to stay injury-free in the Eagles rotation. I just don't know if he's got the durability to be a true defensive end too. And the Eagles like to rotate those guys anyways. You got Derek Barnett, who they've picked the 5th-year option up on, but I would not be surprised to see him moved or to be a cap casualty with the salary cap how it is this year. So the Eagles could use some help at defensive end. And so Perkins, he's got great – the best part of his game is his hands. His hand fighting is superb. He's got a really high motor and he's really athletic. I can't tell you how many times I saw opposing teams run away from him and him chase a play down from the backside. And so he's got a motor that doesn't quit ever. And he's really athletic. Now he doesn't have the best pass rush combos. He likes to fight with his hands, but if you get your hands on him and his initial pass rush move does not land, he doesn't really have a plan B. If that initial move's blocked, he's pretty well much locked up for the play. And he struggles to diagnose and react to run concepts sometimes. The people threw a lot of split zone at him, some pullers, some things like that. And so one of the things that they like to do with him is they just try to get him upfield, focus on penetration. And that's been fine. It works in college, but you really want to see him diagnose the run game better, especially, again, and I keep going back to it, but if you go to that split field look, it's really important that you're solid in the run game with your front 7. So he has experience rushing with a hand in the dirt or standing up. OU experimented with some 3-3-5, and he was an outside backer coming off the edge. But he's more comfortable with a hand in the dirt. So I kind of view him as a 4-3 defensive end rotational option that maybe has some upside, to turn into a solid D-end 3 moving forward for the Eagles.
All right. Let's roll on to Mark's number 1. Go ahead, dude.
My number 1 is another wide receiver. This is a guy I think he's got a wide range of outcomes on where he could go in the draft. And I think he could sneak up into day 2, and he could also sneak deep into day 3. I have wide receiver Jalen Darden from North Texas. He gets bonus points for going to Stone Cold Steve Austin's alma mater. He had 74 catches and 1,200 yards with 19 touchdowns in his senior year in 9 games, to follow up 76 catches, 800 yards, and 12 touchdowns in 12 games his junior year. He increased his average yards per carry from 9.7 to 16.1, which is a pretty unheard of jump from year to year. This shows me that he can do it from pretty much anywhere on the field and run a pretty wide variety of routes. He's also the highest rated red zone receiver by PFF, even in this draft, even above guys like Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, and Terrace Marshall Jr., which is insane for a 5'9", 174-pound receiver at North Texas. If you ever watched the game he was in, which I can't blame you if you weren't watching the North Texas Mean Green, but he jumped off the screen immediately every time. He sat out of the North Texas bowl game with Appalachian State, and North Texas went from being a really solid up-and-down offense to absolutely helpless without him. He was carrying, it seems, a pretty terrible team to respectability on offense, which is pretty crazy to do as an outside wide receiver. I think Jalen Darden has pretty high ups. He could flame out. I feel a little differently as I do it with the Sage Serrat thing. I feel Sage Serrat is not necessarily high ceiling, but pretty high floor. I think Jalen Darden could flame out of the league maybe, but he also, I think, has the potential to be a legitimate starting wide receiver in the NFL.
Awesome. That is our top 5. We have some comments here. Abe Link says, what are your guys' thoughts on Chris Olave? To me, he's more of a second round guy. Any thoughts on that, guys? I mean, he's a great route runner, huge talent, has a huge motor, outworks everybody. But I don't know if that guy's day 3 material. But any comments? Brent? Yeah.
As far as I know, he announced he's going back to Ohio State for 2021.
I did not know.
Yeah, I think last I heard that he had announced on social media he was going back for his 2021 season. But yeah, I mean, I think he was probably looking at a late first round, early second round sort of grade. So, higher caliber player than what we're talking about here, but he's going to be in the 2022 draft, as far as I know.
Yeah, last I had heard it was still up in the air on what he was deciding. So I don't know. I don't think I saw that news, but I definitely didn't see him on any lists when I was looking through, so that would make some sense.
All right, let's wrap this up. Mark, thanks for joining, dude. Final thoughts on day 3 here, and plug your shit, man.
Hey, you can follow me at Mark Henry Jr. _, and you can follow the Tough Cover Podcast at Tough Cover Pod on Twitter and Instagram. I had a great time researching some of these. It also gave me a couple other targets to look at that I don't know are quite day 3 or day 2, but it's always fun to deep dive, especially a couple months out with with everything coming up in the draft season, finally getting fully in swing. Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure, man. You're up, Shane.
You can follow me. Twitter's on the screen at @halfandhalf_TPL. Follow along. Deibs and I are posting rookie scouting portfolios. He's working on Kyle Pitts right now. I just finished Caleb Farley. I haven't decided who's up next for me. So you can mention me on Twitter and tell me who you'd like to hear some more about if you want to. Make sure you follow us on Twitch, twitch.tv/thepaintedlines. Every show we broadcast live on YouTube also goes to Twitch. And so we're really trying to get our follower count up there. And we're about to launch a TPL gaming channel that will stream on Twitch. We're going to be running a Road to Glory mode, and it looks like an option-style quarterback won out on our Twitter vote. So that's what we're going to be doing, and we'll have some information about our first stream for that coming up probably later this week or early next week. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at The Painted Lines. This podcast can be found on Twitter at Party on Broad. Just thank you, everybody, for watching, commenting. Please be sure to like, smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications. We put out content, 2 to 3 videos at least every single day. I just posted Brock's latest video, Sixers breakdown against the Utah Jazz. I literally just put out like 15 Eagles draft videos today. Our viewers are probably like, what the hell's going on? Because it literally is like 15 videos, scouting reports and video highlights together all in one. It's all fun. Those were all day 2 prospects. I will do the same thing here for our day 3 prospects. But thank you, everybody, for watching. We are Party on Broad. We'll be back next week to start doing some dueling mocks. That's going to be a lot of fun. I have some other Eagles podcasts that want to join us. And Shane, I think it's going to be like me and you versus like Eagles Brawl or other different Eagles pods. Maybe you, Mark Henry Jr., if you want to join.
Of course.
It's a tough cover pod versus Party on Broad. Let's go. And then we're going to throw our teams on Twitter, and Twitter will decide who has the better Eagles mock draft. That'd be really, really fun. For Shane, for Mark, for myself, thanks for watching, guys. Stay awesome.
Sixers win it! Wow! Oh, man, and B just posterized Russell Westbrook. You love the Philadelphia Eagles! Let me get a hell yeah!